The numbers coming out of Florida right now are not what the real estate industry wants you to see. In March 2026, the state had approximately 205,970 homes listed for sale. That represents roughly 7 months of supply. Homes statewide were selling for about 97% of asking price. That is not a healthy market. That is a market where buyers have leverage and sellers are losing control. Today, Housing Intel is taking you through 10 Florida suburbs where the meltdown is already underway. These are not speculative forecasts. These are current data points that tell you what is happening right now in markets that millions of people trusted with their financial futures. Stay with me through all 10 because number 1 is going to matter most. My name is David Cole. I am the editor-in-chief of Housing Intel. This channel exists because the real estate industry has a financial interest in telling you things are fine. We do not. Subscribe now and join the people who are making decisions based on data, not on spin. Let us get into what the numbers actually show. Number 10 is Palm Coast. Palm Coast was positioned as one of the safer choices in the Florida market. Quiet streets, newer construction, coastal access, reasonable prices. It was the suburb people chose when they wanted stability without the chaos of South Florida. The data no longer supports that story. According to Redfin and Zillow data from March 2026, Palm Coast home prices were down 3.0% year over year to approximately $336,000. Homes were taking around 95 days to sell. In zip code 32164, prices held near $339,000. But in the downtown Palm Coast corridor, the decline was far steeper, down 10.0% year over year to approximately $216,000. What makes Palm Coast dangerous is that it still looks fine from the street. The lawns are cut. The roads are wide. The subdivisions appear normal. That is the trap. The surface looks healthy, while the market underneath is getting slower and more fragile with every passing quarter. A suburb that was sold as dependable is becoming one of the clearest examples of how a normal-looking Florida market can hollow out before the headlines catch up. This is not chaos. It is a slow bleed in a market that still looks healthy enough to fool buyers walking in. Number 9 is Riverview. Riverview was built on a single promise: Tampa access without Tampa prices. More house, more driveway, more square footage, a better deal. Builders believed it. Buyers believed it. Investors believed it. The market no longer believes it. Redfin data from March 2026 shows Riverview home prices down 1.6% year over year to approximately $379,000, with homes taking around 61 days to sell and fewer transactions closing than the year before. In zip code 33578, prices were down 6.9% to about $343,000. In Panther Trace, a visible neighborhood benchmark, prices were down 10.0% year over year to approximately $360,000. Riverview is a growth suburb that depends on forward motion. It needs constant turnover, new demand, and the belief that every new phase will get absorbed. When that belief weakens, too many similar homes compete at the same time. Builders offer incentives the resale market cannot match. Buyers sense weakness and wait. That waiting becomes the market itself. Too many homes look identical. Too many subdivisions feel interchangeable. When buyers can scroll through endless near-identical listings, urgency disappears. And once urgency disappears in a place like Riverview, the whole structure starts to sag under its own weight. Before we get to the next market, leave a comment below telling us which Florida suburb you are watching right now. We read every comment, and your input shapes what we cover next. And if you know someone thinking about buying in Florida, share this video with them. It could save them from a very costly mistake. Number 8 is Clermont. Clermont was one of the most powerful pandemic-era Florida narratives. Hills, lakes, scenic character, more breathing room than the Orlando core. It was sold as the polished version of Central Florida growth, the place you bought when you wanted space and scenery without giving up Orlando access entirely. Now it is being punished for that story. According to Zillow and Redfin data from March 2026, Clermont home prices were down 9.48% year-over-year to approximately $420,000. Homes were taking around 74 days to sell. In zip code 34711, prices were down an even harder 14.0% year-over-year to about $415,000. In 34714, prices were down 5.0% to roughly $437,000, with substantially fewer homes sold than a year earlier. Buyers still like the lakes. Buyers still like the hills. But buyers no longer like the payment, the risk, or the waiting. And when a market positioned as the polished side of Central Florida starts showing nearly 10% citywide declines, with even steeper drops in core zip codes, that is a warning that the move-up suburban buyer is backing away. When that buyer backs away, these markets get exposed faster than anyone expects. Number 7 is Davenport. Davenport is what happens when three fantasies stack on top of each other at the same time. The affordability fantasy, the investor fantasy, the vacation proximity fantasy. When you pile that much story into one market, you get exactly what Florida produced here. A flood of construction, a flood of listings, and now a market that is struggling to move. Redfin data from March 2026 shows Davenport homes selling at approximately $315,000 and taking roughly 159 days to sell. That is more than double the pace from a year earlier. In zip code 33896, prices were around $374,000, down 2.9% year-over-year. In 33837, prices were near $355,000, with sales volume also down from the prior year. When homes sit for 5 months, the market is not just slow, it is suffocating. Builders throw incentives. Resale owners start panicking. Buyers smell weakness and press harder. The darker truth about Davenport is that it was built for stories rather than residents. Investor story, vacation overflow story, remote work story. Once those narratives weaken, there is not enough core local demand underneath to carry everything that got built. That is why this market feels so exposed right now. Number 6 is Poinciana. Poinciana was the relief valve for people who had already been priced out of everywhere else. Priced out of Orlando, priced out of Kissimmee, priced out of the easier parts of the map. It offered more square footage, a lower sticker price, and a path into home ownership when other doors had closed. That was the whole pitch. The math on that pitch is no longer working. According to Redfin data from March 2026, Poinciana home prices were down 5.8% year-over-year to approximately $290,000, with homes taking around 97 days to sell. In Poinciana Village 8, one of the more visible market pockets, prices were near $300,000, and homes were taking a brutal 132 days to sell, nearly double the pace from a year ago. Cheap enough to click on is not the same thing as safe enough to own. Poinciana was never selling luxury. It was selling relief. Relief from being shut out. But when mortgage rates, insurance premiums, and carrying costs all grind harder at the same time, relief turns into isolation quickly. The long commutes, the repetitive subdivisions, and the thin buyer pools start to matter much more. And the people caught in this kind of collapse are usually the ones with the smallest margin for error. This is a practical collapse, and practical collapses are often the most brutal. Number 5 is Port St. Lucie. Port St. Lucie sits on the Treasure Coast and represents something important in this story. It is the most normal-looking entry on this list. No dramatic narrative, no speculative investor wave, no vacation rental overlay. Just manageable Florida life. More house than South Florida. Room to start over. Enough growth to feel forward-moving. That safety is cracking. Redfin and Zillow data from March 2026 shows Port St. Lucie home prices down 2.8% year-over-year to approximately $400,000, with homes taking roughly 87 days to sell. In zip code 34952, prices were down 8.6% year-over-year to about $320,000. That zip code signals where the real pressure is concentrated. What makes Port St. Lucie so significant is that it was supposed to be the part of Florida that stayed calm. Builders, sellers, and relocators all assumed another demand wave would keep showing up. Once that stops feeling automatic, listings get heavier and price cuts start feeling more serious. When a market this ordinary starts drifting into 3-month selling timelines and sharper local declines, it means the problem has moved beyond the speculative edge cases. It is reaching the parts of Florida that were supposed to feel stable. Number 4 is Wesley Chapel. Wesley Chapel was one of the most heavily marketed growth suburbs in the entire state. New retail, new schools, new master-planned communities. The pitch was simple and it was powerful. The future of suburban Florida had already arrived. All you had to do was buy in before it got even more expensive. Well, it got expensive. Then it broke. Redfin data from March 2026 shows Wesley Chapel home prices down 17.7% year-over-year to approximately $382,000, with homes taking around 71 days to sell. In zip code 33544, prices were down 3.9% to about $432,000. In nearby 33545, prices were about $413,000. And even where prices looked steadier, volume was materially weaker. A nearly 18% annual price decline in a suburb that was supposed to be one of the clean winners in the Florida market is a significant data point. Wesley Chapel was the kind of suburb people bragged about. When a place like that drops nearly 1/5 of its value in a single year, it shatters the idea that newness and branding protect anything. Builders pushed too hard. Buyers stretched too far. The suburb that looked like a victory lap is now one of the clearest warnings about what happens when branding outruns affordability. Number 3 is Lehigh Acres. Lehigh Acres has no luxury cushion, no prestige story, no glamour shield. It is raw Florida housing excess in its most visible form. Cheap land, dense construction, investor bait, first-time buyer bait. The people who bought here believed they were getting in early. The data suggests many of them got in deep. According to Redfin and Atom data from March 2026, Lehigh Acres home prices were down 3.1% year-over-year to approximately $315,000, with homes taking around 90 days to sell. In Lehigh Estates, the signal is much harder. Prices down 18.1% year-over-year to about $430,000. In zip code 33936, prices were down 5.5% to approximately $250,000. Lehigh Acres is one of the clearest examples of a market with no cushion. Once investors slow down and entry-level buyers hesitate, the weakness sits in full public view. More listings, longer timelines, more price pressure on homes where the monthly payment already looked thin on the way up. And this is where the cruelty of the Florida boom hits hardest. The people most exposed in Lehigh Acres were the ones with the least room to be wrong. Budget-stretched households, small investors, buyers who thought a lower price meant lower risk. When prices soften and financing costs stay elevated, lower price markets can take just as hard a hit as the expensive ones, sometimes harder, because there is so little cushion. Number 2 is Apollo Beach. Apollo Beach sells a different version of the Florida dream. Waterfront access, canal homes, golf communities, polished suburban life without the full premium of South Tampa or Sarasota pricing. For years, buyers saw it as the smart luxury compromise, the place where you could get the Florida boating lifestyle and the upscale suburban feel without stepping into the most elite coastal zip codes. In 2026, that compromise is getting much harder to carry. Redfin data from March 2026 shows Apollo Beach home prices near $450,000, with homes taking approximately 88 days to sell, up from 74 days a year earlier, and fewer homes closing than the prior year. The broader zip code, 33572, was near $480,000 with a similar 90-day selling window. Realtor data places Apollo Beach median pricing near $515,000, with year-over-year movement slightly negative. Coastal Florida ownership math is unforgiving. Standard homeowners' policies in Florida typically do not cover flooding. That is one of the biggest financial shocks buyers discover after closing. Flood exposure, wind exposure, insurance premiums, HOA fees, and maintenance costs on canal-adjacent properties all layer on top of a mortgage payment. In Apollo Beach, where the entire lifestyle pitch leans on water access and proximity to Tampa Bay, those layered costs change the calculus completely. Buyers are no longer just asking whether they love the house. They are asking whether they can actually afford the total cost of owning it. The dream is still visible in the listing photos. The bill is catching up, and number 1 is Cape Coral. For years, Cape Coral was one of the loudest Florida housing success stories in the country. Canals, boats, new construction, investor demand, retirement demand, remote work demand, vacation home demand. Every version of the Florida dream appeared to have a place here, and the market rose to reflect that belief. That is exactly why what is happening now carries such a serious warning. According to Zillow and Redfin data from March 2026, Cape Coral home prices were down 3.8% year over year to approximately $375,000, with homes taking around 70 days to sell. In zip code 33991, prices were down 6.5% year over year to about $410,000. In Trafalgar, one of the more visible local neighborhoods, prices were down 2.5% year over year to approximately $415,000. That matters because Cape Coral was one of those places where the story got bigger than the fundamentals. Cape Coral is not just slowing. It is a market built entirely on forward momentum, migration optimism, and the assumption that another buyer would always be right behind the last one. Now inventory is heavier, competition among sellers is louder, and the whole thing feels like a giant market trying to outrun its own overconfidence. The listings still look beautiful. The canal views still photograph well. But underneath the imagery that helped sell the boom is a market that built too much, promised too much, and is now working through the math of what happens when the migration wave cools and the stories lose their power. Here is the picture the data is showing. From the outer ring affordability markets, to the polished growth suburbs, to the canal-side dream machine at number 1, the pattern is consistent. These were markets built on momentum, migration, and the belief that Florida demand would never slow. That belief is now being tested in the data, in the selling timelines, and in the price reductions that sellers are being forced to accept. The question is not whether these markets will recover. Some will. The question is the timeline and the cost. For anyone who owns in one of these suburbs, the informed move is to understand what the data actually shows rather than what the listing narrative still says. For anyone considering a purchase, the same principle applies. The Florida dream is not dead. But in these 10 markets, it is a much more complicated financial calculation than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Housing intel exists to show you that calculation before the mainstream news gets there. This is the data. This is the picture. What you do with it is your decision. And that is exactly why Housing Intel exists. We are here to give you the data, the analysis, and the honest picture that the real estate industry will never show you. If you found this video valuable, subscribe to Housing Intel right now and hit the notification bell so you never miss a report. The market moves fast. The people who stay informed are the ones who stay protected. We will see you in the next one.